An interloper has arrived in Siltforge. Everything was going smoothly for Rosin. His people were happy, his industry was booming, and his city was thriving. But suddenly, while busy coordinating his second dam project, a new beaver arrived. Across the river, on the thus untouched land, a new player laid their claim. Canola Jojin, a beaver from places unknown, stuck down their flag and founded Canolaville. Rosin, furious about facing a competitor so soon, was nearly ready to release the Overlook Dam, flooding out Canola and destroying their stake, when Sinzel, Rosin's right hand, proposed another solution. Canolaville had a wealth of fertile land, while Siltforge had a wealth of hungry beavers and power. Maybe they could solve one problem with another, providing the machinery for Canola to process his crops and feeding their beavers in the process. Thus, with Rosin taking the proposal to Canola, Siltforge's first cooperative agreement was formed. In this episode, we establish Canolaville, taking advantage of the fertile valley the river sits in. We'll touch upon all planted crops, from canola to soy to corn to mangrove trees. To process the food, we'll take power from our dam and bring it upward, establishing even more industry in Siltforge, and making our beavers even happier in the process. And welcome back to Siltforge. So with this episode being focused on expanding, mostly to this side of the river, we are going to need to take care of some site prep. And by that, I mean we're going to need to get rid of almost all of these berries and stumps. I was hoping we could make use of them. I don't really think there's a point to doing that now. They should just be able to come and get rid of all these. And then with all of that cleared out, I just want to preemptively establish we are going to need some ways up these cliff sides here. So I'm just going to get that going already. And I'm also going to come down here and focus in right on this one bush, and I'm going to mark that for demolition. And then with all that out of the way and prepped, the first thing I actually want to get building this episode, our dam here. Now, I don't know if we're going to have enough time because this drought is coming within the day and I don't think we have enough planks stored up. But I do just want to unlock triple floodgates and I want to put a wall of triple floodgates here. Now, this is not going to be as much for storing water as it is going to be that when a bad tide hits, which is going to be after this drought, I want to be able to divert the bad water down this channel as opposed to sending it through and ruining all of our farmed goods. I think that is super important to actually get established before we get to the point where we are building things down here, because quite honestly, if a bad tide hits before we do in this area, it's just all gone. And there's no point in doing anything down here until we have a way to prevent bad water from getting in this part of the map. Now, as always with a drought, we're going to cut back on our water pumps, and then this unfortunately is just going to have to be unused. But what I can do while we wait, I can get started on pulling power out of here. So I'm just going to, for now, stick one power shaft there. We will make use of that when time allows. But with that dam being built, and this drought currently affecting our ability to make planks, we should get started on establishing Canolaville. Now, to be clear here, I am not actually going to end up making this a second district yet. There are two big reasons for that. Number 1, the district crossing costs 600 science points. We do not have enough. Number 2, the district crossing is a headache to deal with, and I don't want to do that right now. We probably will eventually, but I am not doing it right now. So this is just going to be a separate section of the city. And if the beavers want to work over here, even though it's further away, I'm gonna let them. And now the most important part of a farming-focused district. Farms. As with the rest of this map, farmland over here is kind of at a premium until we get to a point that we can actually establish our own water sources for fertilization. So I am going to build all of my buildings, or at least as many as I can, up on this dry area of the map. So I'm going to put 2 farmhouses up here, and I'm going to connect them up, and then I'm going to establish what they are planting. So basically the most important ingredient for the Ironteeth at this mid-food level of the game is going to be canola. It takes 9 days, it produces 3 canola, but this is turned into canola oil, which once we get into the actual tech tree of producing food is going to be very important for almost everything we make. So it is going to be a good portion of what we plant over here. I'm going to make it at least that much. It is probably going to subsume some of the area over here as well, but that is currently going to be where we are planting our canola. And once, oh, we can actually do it now. We're actually going to make them prioritize canola. We're going to do the same trick that we did over here. One of them is going to be on harvesting, one of them is going to be on planting, but both of them are going to be prioritizing canola. Now with them planting Canolaville's namesake, the other thing we're going to need to plant over here is going to be our soybeans and our corn. These are both going to produce things in conjunction with the canola, but neither is as important. So I'm just going to make a small patch of both of these, and then our beavers will plant them and do their whole thing when they feel like it. And then with all of our crops planted, the other thing we are going to need to establish over here in this fertile land is going to be more wood production. So we're going to get another forester. And on this small area of the map, we are going to put a few oaks, but mostly pine. Now the reason for doing this is because we already have a lot of oaks over here. Oaks offer more of a burst to wood because they only produce wood every 30 days. Siltforge is going to need more of a constant wood influx to the point where only planting oaks is going to be a major drawback for our ability to build anything or get anything done. Pines, on the other hand, produce fewer logs, but produce on a schedule that's about 3 times as fast as the oaks. So we're going to prioritize pines currently. And now something that might have popped out to people who were listening earlier is that I built these farmhouses up here and I built this lumberjack down here, despite saying that I wanted to build as much as possible up on this non-fertile area. And the reason for that is because I don't just want to plant these trees, because if I did, I easily could have put this forester up here. I also want to build a set of stairs. And then I want to plant mangrove trees. Now these are actually going to produce wood faster than oaks, and if we don't cut them down, they're going to produce mangrove fruits. So what we're going to do here is we're going to plant a large grove of mangroves, and it looks like in theory that can go all the way over to here. So I'm going to give us that many mangroves. Oh, and we do have our first bad tide approaching, but as I said, I think That'll be a-okay here. With our plants fully grown, a problem is going to become apparent, which is that we are going to need more infrastructure over here on the other side of the river, because otherwise these farmers are not going to be able to harvest this canola and these crops. So we are going to need to build basically all three of these storages. We're going to need a canola. We are going to need a soybean. And we are going to need a corn. And the bad tide has hit, so we need to put this all the way up to max height. There should be... no water able to get in here. Obviously, this will still run, but slower, because it is now only generating a little bit. But as we can see, this dam system being so high and this channel being so wide, it is going to take all of the bad water and expel it off the map. We don't have to worry about anything except for running out of water here, because for some reason all the water was gone pretty much immediately. And just as quickly as the bad tide hit, it is gone again. That first bad tide is really, really short. And our forester is now planting the mangroves, which means that we should get a gatherer over here. And we are going to set some of these mangrove trees to be cut down for wood, and some of them not to be. Now, we have a lot of wood sources, so we're only going to set a small amount of them to be cut down, and the rest of them will just be used to generate mangrove fruit. And then the last little bit of infrastructure I want to build before we move on. We have 3 homeless beavers. We have a lot of jobs over here that need to be filled. Currently, this is not really going to do all that much because this is not a separate district from the rest of Siltforge, but one day it might be. So over on this other side, I am going to build a barrack. Now again, at the moment, this is not going to do much, and it might be a bit problematic if nobody in this barrack works over here, because they're going to have to cross over just as much as the ones over here have to cross over to work over here. But frankly, it is not that large of a distance, at least not enough that I think it is going to matter all that much to us. But the thing that is going to matter, if we come up here and look at our food, is that we are no longer producing enough kohlrabies to sustain our population without dipping into our berries. The number of kohlrabies is steadily falling as time goes on. Luckily, we have a lot of ingredients over here that we have started gathering. So I think it is time to move on to establishing our food production. The first thing we just need to do right off the bat, we need to unlock these power shafts to move power upward. And then with that finished, we need to start thinking about our production chain. So we have 3 foods over here that we're now producing. That is soybeans, corn, and canola. If we come down here to food, soybeans are produced in a fermenter that takes 6 soybeans and 1 canola oil, while corn is produced in a food factory which just takes corn and logs. We're going to start with the soybeans, so that is going to actually require us to start with the oil press. This is just gears, logs, and planks, and some science points. And then this is just going to take canola, and it is going to turn it into canola oil. We're going to make a small storage for that canola over here. And then right next to this press, we are going to build our fermenter. We are going to, as we did with this one, we're going to set the recipe. So that's going to be fermented soybeans. And then we are going to need somewhere to store this canola oil. Now that is an oil. So that means it is going to be stored in a medium tank. And if we look here, we have the option for canola oil. And then we're just going to connect this up. And then once they build all of this, it'll start producing. Of course, that's how the game works. I'm explaining basic mechanics of existence to you. We're going to make a small soybean storage. Also set that one to supply a small fermented soybean storage. We will set that to, I'm saying supply instead of obtain. Actually, I can't set any of these to that, can I? Because we do not have a hauling post currently. We do need to turn this gear workshop back on because we're not going to have enough gears. And then with this all building, the other thing we're going to need to build is a food factory. Now this is the first time that these metal blocks that I started gathering last episode, which seemed silly because it was so early, are going to come into play. So this is going to take metal blocks, gears, and planks. It's just going to be 120 power. We're going to put that right over here. We're going to connect that up just like that. We're going to make this corn rations, and then actually closer to here, I am going to put the corn. And now, unfortunately, with that all in place, all we can really do from this point on is wait. And here we are rounding out the last day of this drought, and we can see just how far our food stores have fallen without access to power. We still have quite a few beavers dealing with kohlrabies, but it is just not enough for our now 38 beavers to deal with. Luckily, however, once we get power back up and running, this is going to get taken care of quite quickly. And just like that, as we do pretty definitively run out of food, power is back up and running, which means that we should see this number skyrocket even before our food factory is finished. But before long, we are going to need a better solution to power generation, because as we can see, our colony can just not survive such an event. A bad tide we might have kept a little better, but that was nearly a disaster for our colony. And on that note, our food factory is now complete. So we will set this to corn rations, and this should start just immediately producing 5 corn rations for every corn that we have. So this is going to be almost 50 corn rations. Almost. It's going to be a full 60 corn rations with only 5 logs in there. And this should produce corn rations quite quickly, as far as I can tell. I mean, it's taking half an hour to produce 5. And for those paying attention, that does mean that we now have a different problem. We need more storage. What we have here is just not going to cut it. So we are going to have to invest in some expanded storage capabilities. And this all is going to take forever to build because we have no planks, because they are all being used. Well, we have some planks, but they're mostly being used to produce gears. But that is fine. We will build some medium warehouses. One of these will be our fermented soybeans, and one of them will be our corn rations. We will also need a warehouse to store our mangrove fruits, because we have quite a few that already have the fruit on them. And then we also need a few more large industrial piles. Holy crap, that was loud on my end. Particularly so that we can store planks, which we have not been storing up to this point, but also so that we can store even more logs. Log storage never goes out of style, so we're just going to keep doing it. And we are up to 11 on that happiness meter. And with that all built, let's take stock up here of our food situation. As we can see, we may actually need to build more corn ration storage, because that is almost completely filled. Not to mention that our fermented soybeans are now almost filled. Basically everything over here that was not something that is immediately picked, like mangroves or berries, is doing great. And with our food now crossing over the 1,000 mark, I think that is where we are going to call it today. Once again, this was a massive expansion for Siltforge. Number one, adding the entirety of Canolaville over here, which is, quite frankly, mostly 4 buildings. It is now producing most of the food for our colony, as well as, once again, expanding our industry in a way that essentially has our beavers fed for the foreseeable future, even without expanding, despite the fact that we will be doing that very soon. So if you have enjoyed this episode of Siltforge, maybe you're just really into farming simulations, or maybe you particularly enjoy the antics of Rosin and his friends, then please do consider subscribing. As always, the algorithm may bring you back here, but the only way to know for sure that you will ever see another episode of this is to hit that subscribe button. If you're feeling up to it, please also leave a like and comment. I really appreciate them on this series, which I may have already given up on, except for the fact that I get such positive feedback from you guys. For now, though, you can always count on Siltforge returning, even if it is on a bit of a slower schedule. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. Siltforge presses forward. Goodbye.